Corporate policy, a cultural flashpoint, and a question of identity at the workplace. Even if it was outdated, the lines still existed. Let's break down that Lenskart style sheet for you. We're looking at a controversy that has ignited a massive debate over corporate policies, religious expression, and the intersection of definition of inclusivity in modern India. The eyewear giant Lenskart, a household name, is currently at the center of a social media firestorm. And the spark for this row was a leaked internal document titled the Lenskart Staff Uniform and Grooming Guide, dated February 2026. This manual, meant for customer-facing staff, allegedly imposed strict restrictions on traditional Hindu religious markers whilst allowing others. We'll tell you all about it. According to the viral screenshots, the policy explicitly prohibited the wearing of a bindi or a tilak and required prior approval for a puja kalava. Meanwhile, this policy permitted the hijab and the turban, of course with some preset conditions. And the document also reportedly instructed staff that sindoor should be minimal and must not fall on the forehead, emphasizing that employees should avoid visible religious markers. But the backlash was immediate and it was intense. High-profile activists and thousands of users on social media platforms questioned the religious asymmetry of these rules. Activist Shefali Vaidya and others asked why a company in Hindu-majority India would treat symbols of the majority faith differently. Some even suggested a complete boycott, saying it hurts the company's image and raises questions about true inclusivity. Lenskart's co-founder and CEO Peyush Bansal responded that the document was inaccurate and it did not reflect the company's current guidelines. He said there are no restrictions on bindi, tilak or any religious expression. The grooming policy has changed over time and older wording did not match their current values. Well, the firestorm is already underway, and Peyush Bansal admitted the language was wrong and then apologized for the confusion on social media. He explained that the company noticed the issue in February and corrected it right away. He took personal responsibility, saying he should have caught it sooner and that the lapse was in the wording, not in the intent. But the row has now turned into a bigger discussion. On one side, critics say the rules showed clear asymmetry and questioned whether companies are truly neutral in their policies. On the other side, some defend the right of businesses to set uniform grooming standards for a professional look, and they point out that Lenskart has now clarified its stand. The episode, but has once again brought up questions about how private companies handle religious identity in the workplace. So we've got a esteemed set of panelists with us on the broadcast, and the big questions that we're trying to understand: if a company chooses to allow certain religious attire like the hijab or turban, on what grounds can it justify the prohibition of a bindi or a kalava or a sindoor, but of course a simplified version of it? And does this kind of incident point to a larger pattern in corporate grooming policies across the country? With us on the broadcast, Shefali Vaidya, author, and with us for a one-on-one segment. Ma'am, you were amongst the first voices to flag this document on social media, and then the furor followed. We've all been watching it. What exactly in this document triggered your concern the most? Even though the company has now come out with its statement, Peyush Bansal has apologized that this is an outdated document. You've argued that this issue is a little bit more deeper. Is your concern about this one policy alone? Is it about the Hindu majority and this company in a Hindu nation, or a larger pattern that you believe exists in corporate India? Many thanks for taking out the time to speak to us.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to present my views on this. When I actually read this document, I couldn't believe my eyes. I double checked it. I checked it from the source. I consulted 2 or 3 AI platforms to see if it's been doctored or whatever, or is it genuine. And then I got the link where the document was actually genuine. And I was shocked because it basically deifies discrimination against one particular religion and one particular religion only. The document very clearly says that hijab is okay, that a Sikh turban is okay, but Hindus are not allowed to wear a bindi, a tilak, sindoor should be unobtrusive, and they should not wear a kalava. This is not about uniform grooming policy at all. You talked about uniform grooming policy, right? If it's a uniform grooming policy, then religious symbols of all religions should have been avoided. That I can understand. But you cannot say that hijab is okay. You cannot say that a Sikh turban is okay. But you cannot penalize Hindus for wearing bindi, sindoor, and kalava, which are not just cultural symbols, they are religious symbols as important to Hindus as probably hijab is to a Muslim. Now, let me give you another case, something like this that has happened before. In Karnataka, a couple of years ago, when there was this huge controversy, there was an educational institute, and that educational institute also had given uniform guidelines, and they had said that you cannot wear hijab as a part of your school uniform. That time, it had become a huge controversy. There were mainstream media debates. Everybody was talking about how hijab is somebody's cultural right and how they should be allowed to wear it, how there should not be any cultural discrimination. So, my question to you is, why are these double standards applied? So, in Karnataka, when a college says that you cannot wear a hijab, they said that you cannot wear any other religious identity also. At least
Yeah.
they were uniform about this. But here, there is a corporate company which clearly is saying that they have a discriminatory policy. They are allowing religious symbols of two religions, but they are basically saying that Hindus should not wear bindis, Hindus should not wear tilak, Hindus should not wear a kalava. It is blatant discrimination, and first of all, it is against the article 15 of the Indian Constitution, which says that no workplace shall discriminate against any of the employees based on their religion, based on their caste, based on their language, based on any of these things. So how can Lenskart do this? And they can say that this is their cultural
Well, Peyush
policy is
Bansal has
something
come
that
out.
I
He's
don't
clarified on
understand.
that point, Mr. Vedder. He says the
First of
company has
all,
now clarified and there are no restrictions on respectful religious
no.
expression. And,
No,
you know,
no, no,
you
no.
pointed out the Karnataka incidents. Of course, there
Yes.
were a lot of protests that we saw in Karnataka
Yeah.
over the entire
Yeah.
hijab ban
Yeah.
at that
Yeah.
particular educational institute. I'm just trying
That's
to
correct.
understand, you know, these kind of furors, there's a massive risk of such issues quickly becoming polarized. Before you answer this, ma'am, let me quickly introduce our other panelists as well. Dr. Kiranpreet Kaur, Human Resources Expert and Advisor, the Human Capital, is also with us. Dr. Nishan Nujumuddin, Women's Rights and Public Policy Analyst, also with us on the broadcast. Back to you, Mr. Vedder. Please continue.
So that quote unquote apology was hardly an apology. First of all, Mr. Bansal said this is an inaccurate document. So I said, please prove the inaccuracy. He then said, change the tactic and said, no, this is an old document and it doesn't reflect our policy now. So where is the current document? Why has he not shared it, first of all? So there is no policy document that
Fair enough.
claims to be currently in use at Lenskart. It's not available anywhere. Now, this was in February 2026, okay? This was not a 15-year-old document. This was not a 20-year-old document. This is a document in February 2026. We are in April 2026. And if you're saying this is an old document and our policy does not reflect this anymore, then where is your new policy document? Secondly, even if it was an old document, why was this blatant discrimination allowed even for a day? Even if it is your internal memo.
Fair enough.
How was this allowed to be drafted? Who drafted it? Who was responsible for it? How was this allowed? How was this passed by HR? I can understand you saying that no religious symbols at all in our shops. That
Yeah.
I can understand.
Either
That
you
can
allow
debate.
everything or you
But
regulate
cannot
everything.
Say,
Yeah, you can't have a middle
cannot
ground.
say you cannot say that religious symbols of only one religion are not okay and that is a part of your grooming policy. No, that's not policy. That is blatant religious asymmetry. That is blatant religious discrimination against Hindus and their right to showcase their own cultural symbols. And this is the reason why I had started the campaign No Bindi, No Business. This was for a different purpose. That was for advertising that was specifically targeted for Hindu religious festivals. But what Lenskart is doing, it's really ridiculous. Secondly, I do not understand how a Hindu run company in a Hindu majority country, where most of the employees are Hindu, most of the customers are definitely Hindu, can have such a blatantly discriminatory policy against the majority religion. This makes no sense. Thirdly, you are a company, you are selling chashmas, then sell chashmas, no? Don't get into religious symbols and don't tell people what religious symbols they should display in their shops or not.
Customer
Sell
interaction
good
guidelines are
eyewear,
quite normal
sell
everywhere.
good
Customer
lenses.
interaction guidelines are quite normal everywhere, ma'am. You'd see them,
No,
you
no,
know,
no.
right from
They're not
Domino's to Pizza
discriminatory.
Hut. There is,
Excuse me.
you know,
No. These are not. I just proved to you that these are not customer interaction guidelines. I just proved to you that this is against the Constitution. Article 15 of the
No,
Indian
I do
Constitution
concede. I do
says
concede, and
that
I do
you
understand.
cannot discriminate against any religion.
Either you adopt a
I
policy
proved to
that
you that
allows
it is
everything.
religious asymmetry.
You,
So how can you say this is a part
I
of a
agree on the
grooming
asymmetry
policy?
front. You either allow everything or you regulate everything. Clearly,
Or yeah,
it's
so
as
then
clear
how
cut as
can
that.
then
You're
how
absolutely
can you
right
say
in pointing that.
this is the company's right?
But then,
We're not talking
my,
about the
my
company's
larger
right to
understanding
have,
and my larger question was, Mr. Vaidya, was about
Yeah.
how these kind of issues, because you cited the Karnataka issue, which is why I'm again
Yeah.
bringing it up. I was trying to understand how there's a massive risk when something like this happens. The issue quickly becomes too polarized. It becomes a Hindu versus Muslim sort of an issue when we're talking about style guidelines where, the
so whose
HR
fault
policies
is
should
that?
come in.
Whose fault is that? Did I do the guidelines? Did I institutionalize religious discrimination as a part of the cultural code? So if a company chooses to do this, then they should be prepared that if this comes out, it will lead to religious polarization, obviously. You mean to say Hindus do not have the right to protest? Only Muslims do? Is that what you're saying? Are you saying that Karnataka protests were okay
CEO should have
because
been
it
a
was
little
a
more
minority
sensitive about
protesting,
this.
and that the Hindu majority does not have a right to protest, that we should just all bend over backwards and say, yes, Lenskart, fine, we will stop wearing bindis? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying any of that, ma'am. I'm not saying any of that.
Yes, you are. You're talking about polarization, right? You are basically saying that polarization
I'm
is
talking
bad.
about the potential risks of
Is a
polarizing.
risk. Yes, please hear me out. Polarization is a risk that Lenskart has taken. It is Lenskart who is polarized. It is Lenskart who has been discriminatory. It is Lenskart who has clearly said that
Yeah.
one religion's rights are above another religion, and that Muslims have a right to wear a hijab, Sikhs have a right to wear a turban, but Hindus do not have the right to wear a bindi or a tilak or a kalawa in the workplace. That, to me, sir, is blatantly discriminatory against the majority religion in a country where both the employees
Okay,
and
Mr. Vaidya, let me
customers
ask you this.
are
Let me
a
ask you this. We
majority.
hear you.
It's as
We
simple
heard
as
you.
that.
We heard you. We understood. We understood. We heard you. I'm trying to understand at what point does the clarification by Peyush Bansal become acceptable? The protest has been registered. The issue is already out in the open. We understand that. Has the trust completely been broken? Or Peyush Bansal's clarification, at what time does it become acceptable? I'm just trying to understand. I'm
First
asking
of all,
questions
okay,
here.
okay.
Yeah.
If I were Peyush Bansal, and if this was my company,
Yeah.
and even if I did not know that this thing has happened, this has happened due to somebody's oversight, the first thing I would have done is said that the buck stops with me as the CEO. And I would have said, I unconditionally apologize for hurting the sentiments of the majority community. Yes, we messed up. There has to be accountability. Where was the accountability in Mr. Bansal's statement? He did not even accept in his first statement that it was wrong. He just hemmed and hawed. It was a statement drafted by a third-rate lawyer. He needs to hire better lawyers. He did not, there was not one word of apology, not one word of accountability, not one word of acceptance that this was wrong. We were wrong in giving out such a grooming policy, and that henceforth such a thing will not happen. If he had made a clear statement like that, the issue wouldn't have snowballed. But the point is, he just did a very legal, garbled explanation,
Okay.
which basically said setting context. He did not need to set the context. What he needed to give was a frank, clean, and concise apology, saying that this was wrong, and it was wrong on every possible criteria.
All right, all right. Before we let you go, Mr. Vaidya, my final question to you. What according to you, you've already given us a little bit of a blueprint of what this should be, but what according to you should a fair and culturally sensitive workplace policy in our country, unity and diversity is a motto that we have at the National Cadet Corps as well. What should that look like? And at the heart of this, I'm again asking you, is this about, and again trying to understand, nobody is asking anybody to not register their protest. Everybody is allowed to, put forth their protest. I'm simply asking, is this about religion? Does this become about dignity? Does this become about equal treatment in public spaces? Or is it a convergence of it all? Because this is, needless to say, quite a sensitive issue.
It is about the convergence of all. Bindi is a Hindu woman's cultural identity. A kalawa is a Hindu person's religious choice. Sindoor is a Hindu woman's cultural identity. So if you are fine in saying that hijab is cultural identity, then you have no right to say that bindi is not cultural identity. And who decides this? Who decides what makes good grooming and what makes bad grooming? You please tell me. Who decides that bindi is bad grooming? Who decides kalawa is bad grooming? Who decides that sindoor is bad grooming? Is it body odor? Are they chewing gutka? Is it the same thing as that? So this whole grooming guide itself is really ridiculous when it impinges on a person's religious freedom. So obviously there'll be reactions. Secondly, I ask you, you are a corporate company, you are selling eyewear, make good eyewear and sell it. That is it. That is all you need to do.
Yep.
You
I
do
think they do a
not
pretty good
have
job of
any
it.
business
Last
of
year's quarter
imposing.
four numbers say that they made massive profits for themselves, but I get what you're
I'm
saying as
sure
well.
they did.
Yeah.
I'm sure they did. But this was before this. If you ask me, I am never going to visit Lenskart ever again. I am never going to buy anything from Lenskart ever again. A company
Okay.
that
Okay.
disrespects my identity, a company that disrespects my religion and my religious symbol is not worth buying from. It is
Okay.
as
All
simple
right.
as that.
We heard
I
you.
make
Many
the
thanks.
choice as an individual customer. It is up to the people to do what they want to. But they made my No Bindi No Business campaign a huge success. And you know that huge brands were forced to recall their campaigns
Well, so
because of this
I
one
mean, of
campaign.
course,
So
you know,
it'll probably work here also. I don't know.
on the lighter note, then Mr. Vaidya, I think a thanks to Mr. Bansal is also in order on that particular front. But many thanks for taking out the time and speaking to us here on News 9. Shefali Vaidya, author and activist, joining us here on News 9. Now, quickly to our other panelists, Dr. Kiranpreet Kaur and Dr. Nujumuddin. Many thanks for patiently waiting, listening on to that conversation. What's your assessment here, Dr. Kaur? What do you think? Let's be blunt here for a second. How does a line like Bindi Tilak not allowed as part of that social, style guideline, not social, even make it into a corporate grooming document? Is this a policy failure, or just like Shefali ji was talking about, maybe Peyush Bansal needs to hire more, better thinkers, better lawyers? Is this a cultural blind spot? What's your assessment?
Well, I feel in a country as diverse as India, companies must, design policies that are culturally intelligent and not just operationally convenient. So it's definitely a failure at the drafting stage, not just drafting, then the approval, and when such policies go out in the industry, it kind of embarrasses other HRs in the industry as well, because it exposes companies to legal scrutiny and lot of branding impact. Employees loses their trust. Nobody wants to then work for a company which restricts them to come with their own identity. Brand erosion, talent attrition, lot of issues in hunting the bright minds in the country. While I completely understand that the intent can be different, and it could just be a blind spot here, which unfortunately, got quite some limelight here. But this is not about bindi versus hijab. This is about workable policies, which one must think should be consistent and defensible and fair, so that it doesn't, hurt anyone's religious emotions, or challenges or questions their identity. So I think one needs to be more careful when we're talking about
But
policies, when
isn't
we're
there a
setting up.
credible, argument that we heard from Shefali as well? That, I mean, when you're not allowing somebody to wear the bindi, how are you allowing somebody to wear the hijab?
I would honestly feel it's a foolish drafting of policy at the ground level itself, because whenever we are drafting any appearance policy, I think it has to do more with the safety, hygiene, or core brand requirements. None of that gets fulfilled here when you go that deeper and pick and chooses those little things that are hurting the religious sentiments of an individual. So I think right now they need to really make it up more than just a statement. Probably create a platform where employees can also come back and share their feedback on all other policies as well, so that they're able to revamp how it's functioning at the moment and make it more effective, make it more sustainable, and good in the long run.
Well, the apology from Peyush Bansal, I don't think that was enough as far as, Shefali Vaidya was concerned. Dr. Nisha Najumuddin, what's your assessment? The company says that this was an outdated document, but the optics have triggered a very real backlash. In a country like ours, in a country like India, can companies realistically enforce neutral dress codes without appearing selective or insensitive? Is that even possible? We've seen it at several of those places. I think you've got Muslim workers that also have to adhere to a proper dress code, and the other religions also have to adhere to a proper dress code, and that would have been a better situation. That's my limited understanding. What's your take?
In India, bindi, sindoor, hijab, they're not just religious, right? They're other identity markers, I would say. And the way a person dresses, that expresses their religious freedom and the personal expression. We have Article 19, we have Article 14, we have Article 25. So all these tells us about the fundamental rights that we have. So over here, you need to understand. See, it's not today. India is a democratic country, and we have a very very great cultural evidence also. Look at the Indus Valley civilization. Look at the Harappan figures. They show the forehead markings. Now the ancient texts and the traditions associate Bindi with the Adna Chakra, which is the third eye, and the married women who traditionally wore the Sindhu and Bindi as dignity symbols. Today, the corporate is asking them to remove all that, which means it is like erasing the identity of the Indian women. So now for Indian women, you need to understand the bindi or the symbol, it is not a decoration, it's an identity. And we need to respect those things. And now, such kind of policy from the employee's perspective, when you see again, so sometimes, when they say that the hijab should be black in color, the turban should be black in color, why is there anywhere mentioned in the Indian constitution that the hijab should be black in color? No, right? And now even the employees, they feel a loss of dignity, cultural alienation, and they feel a kind of forced assimilation. Automatically, their productivity decreases. And an employee who will hide their identity cannot fully show loyalty and work for the company also. And this also has a great social and political impact also. Because people will start doing the communal narratives, the political polarization will happen, the boycotts will happen. So sometimes, one policy of a company or one ridiculous policies like this, wherein it can turn up to the national debates overnight, like what we are seeing today. So
Yep.
what we need to understand today is this is not just a bindi versus hijab issue. The real issue is equality plus consistency plus clarity. So as seen in Lenskart, what are we seeing in Lenskart? The problems arose from the policy language plus perception. So in policy, the perception is very important as powerful as reality. So Lenskart need to understand that. So now with Lenskart, even though Peyush Bansal has apologized also, he needs to understand what his company policies have put across, because equality is not selective, it is symmetrical as well. That is one basic thing which they need to understand. So a company can design uniforms, but they cannot design identity. That is never in any protocol. So India's strength is not uniformity, but it is in unity in diversity, which is a very basic thing that such kind of people must understand. And having a workplace which is very free to work is very, very important. Very important.
Well, next time maybe on Shark Tank, Peyush Bansal can endorse a Bindi brand, and maybe all of this will be under the bridge. But we'll have to
Kabir,
wait for that.
Also to add points, see what I felt from this is people were talking about bindi, hijab, and all the other rest. Even I saw something called as even wearing the henna, the mehendi. That is also not permitted, which is quite surprising to me. Traditionally, if you see, henna is being worn for getting that cooling effect in your body, especially in summers. People do wear it to reduce the body heat also. Yeah. So funny for me to see that, you shouldn't even wear that. So this episode of Lenskart teaches us something bigger than policy. It teaches us all about balance, I would say. A company needs discipline, but
I think that's the moot word here. That's the moot word here. Dr. Kaur, the balance. How do we strike that balance? Going forward, what is the correct framework? Should companies allow all kinds of religious symbols? Create a clearly defined style sheet, which was in this case clearly backfired, or uniformly apply those restrictions? What's the right balance over here?
Karthik, fairness cannot be selective. I think a good company policy should not only justify the legal grounds, but also should appear fair to every employee who walks into the workplace. The idea behind creating the policy is to creating an environment where everybody feels welcomed, everybody feels, fair, and therefore they're able to give their 100%. So that's the whole aim here. And I believe every policy that is created must, stick to the ground reality and the ground rules of creating and drafting the policies, which is missing.
And do you think that these debates, like Dr. Najumuddin was pointing out, they become national issues overnight? They're less about faith, they're more about perception, they're more about politics, they're more about social media amplification. We've got our own data. It's not going to be nice to disrupt on-air hygiene and cite all of that on air. But do you think this is less about faith and more about perception and politics?
Like I said, intent would not matter after a point if the impact is high. So I think to be able to stay away from these, the organization must clearly codify their guidelines and apply them uniformly only after their managers are trained and they understand those policies are right. And despite that, create an open communication channel where before it becomes a massive debate, it's sorted within the organizations where employees feel comfortable coming to you and telling, hey, you know what you've written on the policy may not sound right to me or 10 others. Do you want to check once again? And, creates an environment healthy for everyone to walk in with respect and dignity.
Well, certainly, certainly. Finally, before we wrap this up, Dr. Najumuddin, we keep seeing these outdated policies, go viral. This time it's Lenskart and pretty much a frame that's on the anvil. Does this point to weak internal audits? Does this point towards poor communication within the companies? Clearly, Peyush Bansal did not have, a candid conversation with whoever was drafting these policies. Is that a prime concern?
See, when the companies draft such kind of policies, they forget one fact that, a workplace is something that removes, a workplace that actually removes the identity will eventually lose humanity. So automatically the corporate culture, the corporate perspective as a whole starts deteriorating. So the strongest companies are those companies that control appearance, but at the same time, they respect identity also. So finally, the question is not whether the employees should follow rules. The question is whether the rules respect the people who follow them. So uniformity may build a brand, but diversity builds trust. So this is a very important thing that the companies like Lenskart and Peyush Bansal should understand. Because having known him as well, I think he's a very nice individual. But I don't understand how did he even fail to see this particular policy draft? Is my question, which is really quite surprising as well. But how did he forget to train his HR to see the diversity and the inclusion framework? How did he fail to even see the gender sensitive policies as well? So I think we need to keep one thing in mind. India's strength is not in uniformity, it is in unity and diversity. Kindly focus on that and make sure that we don't end up in such kind of policies which will actually hurt the sentiments of many people, especially
Fair
the
enough.
female. As
Fair
I
enough.
mentioned in my previous, debate also, like we had a discussion about Nashik issue, right? See,
Yeah.
when you discourage women from doing all this, the female workforce participation again will reduce. Slowly and gradually, our country is coming up. So when you try to do all this, where is the equality there, Baba? Where are you trying to promote it again? I think the co-panelist, Mr. Kaur, will also agree to that. The HR policies sometimes, they need to make sure that you are here also to understand the, empathy and sympathy perspectives also of people, because we are working human beings, not working machines, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
More than
That's very
more than Hindu symbols being targeted, it's about who decides identity at the workplace. Is it the company or is it the individual? I think we're going to leave it at that. Many thanks, Dr. Kiranpreet Kaur, Dr. Najumuddin. Always a pleasure to have you with us here on News9. This is not just about one company. This is not just about one policy document. In a country that's as diverse as ours in India, the real question is not which symbol is allowed. It's about should identity need permission at all? And if yes, should that be selective or not?